state, and local. My guest today, I'm very pleased to say, is somebody who's known by many in Wrentham as the best dressed man in Wrentham, but everybody calls him Senator. My guest is Senator Richard Ross, Senator in the Massachusetts Legislature. Thank you so much for coming.
You're very welcome.
Appreciate it. I know you're busy this time
Glad
of year.
to be with you. Sorry about the cold hand, but it's snowing out.
I know, it just started. Well, now, I wanted just to start on a positive note. I was very pleased. I get the mailings from Aaron Hearn about what you're doing and where you're going and so forth. And you and some other Republicans have proposed a stiffer animal cruelty law because of that terrible puppy doe thing.
We're all horrified by sometimes the things that man can do to our best friend, which is obviously our dogs and other animals. And I think it became apparent to us we need some good animal welfare type stuff. So we did propose the puppy doe bill, but obviously until that goes to committee and actually goes to hearings, we don't know where that's going to end up. But I think the public in general was horrified by that whole story, and by the pictures that came out of it. I mean, pictures worth 1,000 words, and you saw that poor animal had been brought to the brink of death apparently many times before. So many injuries had been inflicted that death had to come, and that's a sad, sad statement.
Where is that guy now? Do you happen to know? Is he in the correction?
I haven't visited him in jail.
He's in Massachusetts.
He's in Massachusetts, yes.
So now, who else proposed that with you? Was it some other Republicans?
We did it as a caucus. Bruce Tarr and I think all four of us in the Senate signed on, and I don't know how many of the House members. That's not something I looked into, but it's got some broad support, and I think it has broad support on both sides.
Now, I have heard you refer to yourselves as a small, merry band.
Small, but actually, Betty Poirier from North Attleboro coined that of us in the House. Anytime she'd introduce us, she said, we're members of a small but merry band, and I've kind of adopted that for the Senate side because we're even smaller, and I think we're even merrier. It's Bruce Tarr, it's myself, it's Senator Hedlund from Weymouth, and newly elected and friend Don Humison from Westfield.
Oh, good.
It's nice to have another man on board.
Was that a Republican seat that they kept, or did he defeat a Democrat?
He actually, Mike Knappich, had served for years in the Senate and had a stellar career, a great orator, much similar to Bruce Tarr. And I really kind of panicked when I knew he was leaving, but he accepted a post out at Westfield State. So he's out there working in some of the fundraising areas that they're deficient in since that president went rogue on Westfield. So he's got a big task ahead of him as well. But
that was a Republican seat.
It was a Republican seat.
Before. Oh, good.
We're just hoping in the special election that gets generated by Don Humison left the House. So there's a House seat now open for Westfield, and we're hoping that we can retain it for a Republican seat again.
I was just astonished that Adivinola did so poorly.
Yeah.
I mean, that woman was a real hard left person. I mean, I don't know that people don't I was astonished. I didn't think it would be that much of it was 20,000 votes difference.
All I can say is I happen to be a Republican that can be elected, so I can only talk about the things that work for me. And I've been astonished at how many times we as Republicans choose brilliant people that would make good candidates, but we don't choose people that have the experience or the background or necessarily the connections with the people that they want to serve. And I think back in 2004, that's a good example to take. Mitt Romney had 132 candidates that he'd handpicked from brilliant and stellar careers throughout a whole panoply of assortment of things. And I ran on as my own at Scott Brown's bequest to try to retain this area seat for Republicans down in this neck of the woods. That being said, I'd also run a business here for 36 years, and so consequently the connections I had with folks in Norfolk, Wrentham and Plainville in particular, but even in a wider range of towns throughout the region, made me electable. And back in 2004, I was the only Republican that was elected statewide. So. But it does boil down to choosing people that have the ability to connect, and I think that's something that we've had a challenge doing. For example, I've met Mr. Adivinola several times, but I still don't know what he does or where he came from or what his connection to the people are, and I think that probably was his downfall.
There's also the party loyalty.
Well, when you've got such a small party, we're all loyal, but we have to attract.
No, I mean, as far as the Democrats, I mean, they won't even consider. Most obviously won't even consider voting for a Republican.
But we have to attract a wider range of voters than the average bear. And if people learn that they can trust you, even the Democrats will sometimes vote for you as well. Case in point, I'm the first Republican to have won Needham in 25 years. And consequently, I was told by several State House insiders at one point, don't even bother to spend any time up in the northern end, you can't win that. And they named specific people within Needham, for example, that weren't going to be hospitable to me. And I purposely went out of my way to make the phone call to each of the chairman of the board and members of the Board of Selectmen. I met them one-on-one wherever they wanted to meet. And by the time the election came, not only did I win their support, but I won the support of the community. So I think it's taken the time to build the bridges. It's taken the time to let people not think that you're some big bad Republican that's going to pull them down a road that they feel very uncomfortable with.
Yeah.
But if you can show a very human side and let them know that
Right.
you're going to fight for your principles and probably stick to them, but you're not going to embarrass them or make them miserable in the process. And I think that's probably part of it.
Now let me ask you something on the gas tax petitions, and we did get enough of those. But is there any way that that can be kept off the ballot, because people are afraid of that?
Are they really?
Yeah, I think so. I think because yeah, I mean,
Well, if they don't put it on the ballot, how are they going to get it
No, but
withdrawn?
I mean, is it well, they wouldn't be able to. But I mean, is it possible for? I guess I should ask you: is the legislature able to keep that off the ballot, even though all the signatures were collected?
They may be able to, but I don't think there'd be the will to do that because I think the legislature wants that extra tax. And there's so few of us Republicans that have been vehemently against the gas tax and all those other revenue-raising, as they call them, measures. We were shouting from the treetops about the tech tax back when we did it last spring. We knew it was bad. We knew it was bad for business. And they overwhelmingly approved it.
Oh, yes.
And within 3 or 4 months, they got such a backlash from
Right.
the technology community, they wanted to reconsider that. And
Right.
when they did, they brought back kind of what we as the Republicans had
Right.
proposed, and they approved it unanimously, pretty much amongst their body.
But I believe that
Except for the most liberal of members. 1 or 2 of them.
But I think with the gas tax petitions, that was about it being automatic, not to do away with gas taxes. That was what was
Yeah,
that was the
we're
point on the
against anything
petitions.
that
It was the
automatically goes
automatic
up every
factor.
fixed to inflation, automatically going up. And whether it's that tax or any other tax, any provision that's in there to make it an automatic
Right.
increase from time to time is going to be opposed by the minority party.
Oh, I know that.
And the reason we do it is because
Well-
if you're going to be raising anything and people are impacted by it, you should know who's doing it to you.
You should. People should be doing their job. So okay, because as I say, people were wondering, even though we got the signatures to stop the automatic part of it, it would stay in place that somehow the legislature could ignore the petition.
You've seen here in Massachusetts the legislature do a whole bunch of things that you don't necessarily anticipate, or even the federal government, as far as
well.
the number of people that it takes to filibuster. When they found out that there were enough Republicans to filibuster regularly, that they raised the threshold by which the Republicans would need support in order to filibuster any measure.
And yet years ago they were complaining about it
Yep.
because the tables were turned.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's just a...
That works in federal government or state government.
Now, I wanted to ask you, what's the story with what do you know about what's going forward with the crime lab situation? Is there any idea how much that's going to cost the taxpayers to straighten all that out?
They're
Is there
still trying to
anything
get a
new
handle
that?
on what the costs are, the irreparable damage that's been done, the people and the cost of retrying cases, all that sort of thing are going to obviously ripple out for years. And it's amazing that one person within a crime lab scene could do so much damage.
Well, that was a supervisory issue, wasn't
Yep.
it? I mean, clearly... I mean, there's
Supervisory, but it was also probably one where someone wanted to have a little bit more authoritative posture than they deserved. And yeah, Annie kind of overstepped her bounds.
I mean,
by far.
weren't there like 3,000 people involved? 3,000?
I think more than that. Yep.
I mean, and from what I have read, as I'm very faithful about reading, try to get everything I can get from the Herald, that the proposed punishment is not very much.
No.
Do you have? I don't remember what it was. But now, did you think she just got a liberal judge? How in the world could she have gotten away with
Again, it's
such
the
a light
Commonwealth of Massachusetts.
a light sentence on
Yeah.
that? I think it was a couple of years, maybe, or.
I think it was 3 to 5, something like that.
Oh, okay. I
But
didn't even know if it was.
it's still not as
64
extensive
people
as
are
you would
dead.
think.
Oh no, excuse me. I'm sorry. I interrupted you.
Yep. Go right ahead.
No, I was going to say the 64. Oh no, that had to do with the compounding thing. That's why the people that died.
That's right.
64 people. And do you know anything about
Well, there's
that?
a compounding bill that's coming down the pike that will come before us very shortly, probably within the next couple of sessions when we're back in. And I think they'll get reins on that as well.
Because all of those places have to be licensed, right?
That's right.
Now,
Oddly enough, the guy that owned the largest of the compounding places that were involved was a guy from Rentham. So
Oh, there was more than one.
I believe there was more than one,
My goodness. Let me also.
as far as practices go.
Yeah. Let me ask you a little bit about the business with the mass connector, the health connector, because that's been. I had some other issues here, but they're a little bit in the past. But that's been really great. Now, I understand it's the same company that built Obama's website. Now, is there some talk about not paying them or holding some of the payment in escrow, because it's just been a very bad.
All I know is what has failed in the national model is the fact that it doesn't address specific states' needs. Romney had done a real good job of working with us in the legislature back when we did.
In 07, I believe it was.
In 07,
wasn't it?
that's right. And I'll tell you, he did a great job. And it's not meant to be a one-size-fits-all. And every state is different. Every relationship between the states and the people that insure within them is different. And I think that's what they're running into. The system just doesn't mesh together to provide for a seamless transition to national health care.
Because I understand that they were going to try. They needed to enroll 200,000 people, and I think about 150,000 have lost policies. And then
Yep.
you have others that have to re-enroll for Medicaid.
We get people calling our office every day that are confused, and we're confused, quite frankly, about the people that can qualify for what still exists and how to get them back to where they need to get. And working with our federal legislators is very difficult because we don't have any Republicans representing us in this area, and they're somewhat reluctant to work with us, I think.
No, who chose CGI? Were they supposed to be the best at doing this sort of thing, or does the legislature?
To be honest,
how was the
I'm not
legislature-
familiar with CGI, by the way.
Well, they're Canadian of all things,
Yep.
and you would think that Obama would have given that to it must have been an American company that could
Yep.
do that. But in any case, maybe it was, who knows? It certainly couldn't have been cheaper, because our health connector was what, 69 million,
Yep.
and I don't know what I don't know whether the federal one was it 600 billion or some crazy. You can't even conceive of these figures.
Amounts that are off the chart.
Now, because I know that I had heard that in some cases when they ask people questions, when people are trying to sign up, there was some sort of a question of, have you been incarcerated? And if you said no, the reaction came back that you actually had said yes. I mean, it was just really,
The
it's
whole
really in a
website
big
was screwed up.
mess. Now, Charlie
I'm
Baker.
fortunate that I had insurance and I didn't have to get on that website.
Now, Charlie Baker, I understand, is going to have a primary contender for governor, Mark Fisher. Do you know anything about him? He's a Tea Party
I
Republican.
know nothing
believe.
about him other than I met him for the first time. Where was it? In Attleboro. I went to an Attleboro Republican Town City Committee meeting last week, and this guy came out of the background as I was leaving, just said, I just want to introduce myself. My name's Mark Fisher. And I kind of went, he said, and I'm running against Charlie Baker. I said, oh, really? I said, are you a Republican? And he said, yes. And that's the only time that we've talked. So.
Because I understand, Charlie Baker's been trying to run fairly left to, and it's a kind of, I guess it's something you kind of have to do if you expect to get elected, especially for governor. But apparently now he's just come out complaining about this healthcare connector, which he hadn't said anything prior to, because the connector's been a problem. Charlie Baker.
Okay.
Because it's been a problem for a little while now. And so I guess now he's just recently been complaining, and I guess as a former CEO, he was saying you can't just let these things go. And
former CEO of a healthcare organization
right, exactly,
as well.
exactly. And so there was, I guess it was Hillary Chabot had done an article thinking that, commenting that Charlie had sort of avoided the so-called red meat issues, but now he has this contender for the primary for governor.
Yep.
And so that maybe he's going to be a little bit more vocal in terms of conservative issues.
One can only hope.
What's going on now? There's something else in the news. With the EBT cards. Were you satisfied with the changes that they made, or did you think? I assume you thought they
What
should
I
have
like
done
is
more.
we've been doing incremental changes all the way around as far as reforms go in many layers of government. The big changes are really hard to do with such a supermajority in the State House. And we're lucky every now and then to propose something, and we usually give something up, but we then go for a couple of things that we can
Right.
actually. I'm going to shut that down. Sorry about that.
Sorry.
I think we've had some good successes. I am pleased that we're tightening up on it. There's a lot more tightening up to do, and there's a lot of things going on where benefits are involved that It's tough to make sure that the people who are getting them are actually qualified. And when you find out that people have taken advantage of them that weren't qualified, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater and leave those that truly deserve to have some
Well,
benefits
no, I mean, and
left
nobody's
hanging
talking
in the
about,
linchpin.
but I mean, there was, thank goodness, Shauna, and of course they charged her $800 for 10 hours of work, I believe it was, which I find kind of hard to believe, since it would seem to me you'd just be pulling it off the computer about
Yeah.
the balances on the EBT cards. I mean, one was as high as $12,000.
That's amazing to me.
And there were a couple others, at least a couple others, who were in the thousands.
And with the computerization and the availability of information, you would think that that
It
stuff
was just
couldn't
to
happen.
stonewall her. I mean, I thought it made them look very, very bad.
Yeah.
That she, had to go. And I had heard, I don't know if you know anything, but I had read, I should say, that she had gotten quite a bit of some pushback from other Republicans on the Hill for being so, pushing so hard with this EBT.
Well, she's from a very, very impoverished area to some
Taunton,
degree
yeah.
compared to the rest of the Commonwealth, and I think for a lot of legislators, there are issues that are more current and more important, whether it's growing jobs and getting the economy back on track, and they don't want just EBT cards to dominate the issues of the day and to subtract from their push to get people good jobs, good well-paying jobs, and to get the economy back on track.
But there's an awful lot of bad feeling about that. I mean, people were really, I think even the Tsarnaevs had EBT cards.
I'm lucky that I'm in a district where that hasn't been a big issue, other than in the minds of us that are taxpayers. So, I mean, we obviously have a concern about it. We want to make sure that state money that we're paying our taxes for is being used properly. But we certainly don't have the abuses in this area that they do in some other areas.
Well, in York, no. But and yet
I got a
even
neat
though,
district.
and even though Shauna does come a fairly impoverished area, she did, and she was, pushing to get the EBT reform. She was reelected, which I thought was really astonishing. Because she's not pandering to that whole thing about what is the government going to give you, and be dependent and that sort of thing.
She's a good candidate.
Oh.
She's well known by her community, and I think she's earned her respect and their vote, obviously.
Oh, she really has. I mean, I hope she stays in the legislature. People were talking about maybe her running for governor. Now, tell me something else about. Here's a kind of a. What was the buzz up there about this ridiculous $9 million Duvall spending spree
More
on his
drapes.
office and the stainless steel appliances and the marble or the granite, whatever he was going to use, and then supposedly he was going to get the heating system redone. And I think he kind of mentioned that later when people said $9 million on an office.
I think he's gotten enough pushback even from his own party that I think that's going to fall off the
plate.
plate.
You do?
I do. I don't believe he's going to get there's not $9 million to pump into that office.
Well, was he going to? Did he want to have the heating system upgraded? Because I can see there you would be running into. Was that also?
I don't
part
know, to
of
be
it?
honest with you.
Because I know.
But I would imagine that north corner office can get a little chilly from time to time.
Well, maybe psychologically.
It's going to be a lonely job up there.
I don't know if you remember this a while back, and I thought this was very funny when do you remember a while back when the Herald was looking into how much time people were spending at the State House?
Yep.
Do you remember that? And I guess Duvall told him at the Herald, well, why don't you set up a camera outside of at the garage exit? Which they did. And then the state police, state police came over and said, "What do you do?" And so
That could be a security issue, I would think.
Well, they had put it up on the front page of the Herald, so they show it to the trooper. That Duvall had said, "Well, just set up a camera when you can see when people come and go." When his usual, authoritative type of dismissive, And so then they went looking. So the trooper went to take the reporter up to find Duvall, and they couldn't find him. But do you remember that whole story about how much time?
I was not aware of it even being an issue. And quite frankly, I can remember several legislators, even the people that I work with on our side, advising me, keep in mind who you represent and where they are. It's your constituents back in the district. Don't get enamored with the environment at the State House and come in and spend too much time in here, because nobody in this building can vote for you. And they're absolutely right. And most of us take to the consideration of going out to the senior centers, being out in the district, meeting with constituents, having constituent office hours like I try to do in each of my 12 communities. And if you're doing that, there's not a whole lot of hours that you're in there. The other thing that they want to see, though, is that you're accountable to them. And the accountability
right.
comes from the fact that we meet every so often, twice a week. We're in session, informal, minimally. And when there's a legislative agenda that's full before us, it's either Tuesday and Thursday in the Senate. Sometimes it's like Mondays and Wednesdays in the House. But formal sessions are very important. And even though, for example, I've had some health issues in the last couple of years with my leg and everything else,
yes.
I'm now 8 years in the legislature. And
You haven't missed any?
I have not missed one roll call vote. And
Wow.
if I can
That's
do that
impressive.
with the things that happened with my leg and all the other
Exactly.
things, my colleagues who criticize me because I happen to own a small business, I always say, well, wait a minute. And they say, well, I'm a full-time legislator. Well, if you're a full-time legislator, why do you have a 60% voting record? I'm a full-time legislator. I happen to own a business, yes. But I said, in spite of other things that could have precluded me being able to be in here, I make sure I'm here all the time when we're in session.
Well, that's what you should be. And I think the thing also with the Herald article had to do with the per diems and whether people were coming in and still taking the per diems. Could that be possible? Could you just? I mean,
Now
how
that's a
loose
whole
is
other
that?
story, I guess, because as a Republican who doesn't want to burden the taxpayers, my district's big, and as I told you, it could take me an hour and a half to go from end to end. I bought a new car in January, and just as I pulled in the parking lot today, and I didn't even make a mental note of this because I thought this might be something you asked, but I now have 29,596 miles on this new car that I bought back in January. I take no per diems. I take no reimbursements, and so consequently, all my travel, all that's on my dime.
Oh, good for you. Now that per diem, is that just to get in Boston and out?
It's only when you're in session. And
Okay.
the days that you're in session, it's a fixed rate depending on the mileage as established by the legislature. I think my per diem, if I chose to accept it, would be $25.
So if they all weren't in session, but you wanted to go in there, you're on your own?
You're on your own.
Now what about traveling around to see people in the district?
You're on your own.
Okay. Now tell me something.
If it is a perk, I don't know about it.
Now tell me about this whole gaming commission situation.
What an interesting development. I had the privilege of being on the conference committee in the Senate of all of the gaming bills. And I'm very pleased that the Senate President and Ways and Means chairs and other people made it very...
You're on Ways and Means now, right? Did you
I
get
am.
promoted
I was on it before, but now I'm the ranking member on
Oh,
Ways and
wonderful.
Means.
But you're no longer the minority whip.
That's correct.
But this is a step up.
That's correct.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I have actually 11...
There's a lot of clout, I suppose, in that committee.
I've got 11 standing committees and I think 2 or 3 joint committees that I'm on.
Now, is every committee required to have at least one Republican or some Republican
Yes.
on there? So
There's a
with
member
so
of
few
each.
of you.
There's so few of us, that's why I had 13 committees at one point. But think about the wonderful opportunity that presents
well,
if
yes.
you're someone
Really-
who is at a point in life where you can pay attention to that. I'm now at the point where my kids are pretty much done with college. I am able to devote an inordinate amount of time to being able to be a good legislator. And I think that rings true for the people that I represent. It's a good deal for them to have somebody that can be full-time that way.
Absolutely. So you were saying about the, we were talking about the Gaming Commission and this whole thing with the lawsuit.
Well,
and
I was shocked to
Caesars
find
and
that
Wynn and
Steve Crosby,
Russian
who's the
mafia.
chairman, wasn't as clean as we perhaps thought he was. And I do realize the disclosure might have been an oversight by him, that he did have a friend who
Right.
owned property that has
Everett.
something to do with Suffolk Downs. But even the appearance that there could be some impropriety kind of taints the process that they've been trying to keep so visible and so open. I hope, however, it doesn't taint the ability of Plain Ridge Racecourse to become the
well, from what again in the Herald, it's
track of
apparently,
interest.
apparently Suffolk Downs has jettisoned Caesars.
Yep.
And there was an investigation to found that Caesars had such a huge debt, and that they had some link to the Russian mob.
Yeah.
Apparently.
This
But
is the way the
Crosby's
process
getting
should work.
Sued by Suffolk Downs, right?
Yep.
Because some impropriety in terms of favoring Wynn.
Well, I
Wynn
think it wasn't
Casino.
necessarily that he favored Wynn. It's just that he had a tie of some interest to a person that was his friend that owned the property. So that's something he should have disclosed.
But okay, but they were alleging that he had favored.
Yeah.
Well,
I think anybody that had
the Everett proposal.
been the disadvantor of whatever the Gaming Commission's decisions were would now make all kinds of outrageous accusations.
Do you think there'll be something on the ballot about repealing the casino
There'll
permission.
definitely
I'm
be
not
an
saying this
attempt
right,
to
but-
do that, but I think the process is working. If Steve Crosby isn't the guy to be the right guy to finish the job, which I do believe he is, then I would like to see them put somebody in place, because I think the process is working. And as you watched all the different entities that were going to be competing for these licenses fall off the plate, and it actually got to a point where it looked like the slots at the track issue was going to be the only one left. And for this district, that's probably the most important one of all. When you get somebody like Penn National that came out of the woodwork to kind of overtake the lead on Plain Ridge Race Course.
For slots, you're talking
I had
about.
always felt that the smaller support small business, local business, that bang for the buck is what happens at the tracks. And it happens with horse farms, the Longobardis here in Norfolk, and other people around the area. There's horse farms, there's open space, all kinds of things that go on that's associated with it that's good for the Commonwealth. I've always worried about those big entities that you can't quite explore their true roots or what their true agenda is, who come with a big straw and just suck us dry. And so consequently, I kind of like the way the process has been working.
Now, is MGM approved for Springfield? What's going on with that?
I'm not sure where they stand on that process at this point.
But have they, is there going to be one in Springfield?
Springfield is one of the locations.
Okay.
But they need to have a successful, approved bidder on that process before they can even go down that road.
And let me just ask you one last thing. This business with the Department of Children and Families, I understand they found that they've come up with some figure of 70 children having been abused. Do you know when that was, how long, do you know anything about that, or how long ago, how long that's over, what time that's been, because there was some concern about that, about the oversight of the Department of Children and Families.
That's not one of the committees I'm on. Certainly as somebody that reads about it, I'm concerned about it, but with the other 11 to 13 committees I'm on, that is not one that's on my radar screen.
All righty. Let's see, I guess that's about everything. I suppose, what else?
You
if there's
covered a
anything
lot
else
of bases.
One last thing. Do you think Duval is still going to try to install those devices in the cars to
That
see where
concerns
people
me.
are driving and how
Yeah.
much they... Do you think that's going to go through?
I would hope not, and I'll be one of the most vocal opponents of it. I mean, I travel the highways and byways constantly, and you certainly can't. One of our greatest freedoms and the things that we appreciate the most is our ability to drive and perambulate at will. And that's why even some of the legislation that I propose, which is stiffer drunk driving or alcohol-related things with young drivers, is tied to the ability to get a driver's license, because we know that's one of the biggest concerns that people have, whether you're young or old. It's the ability to have your license and to be able to get around.
Well, couldn't that also tell you where people have been, not just...
It can work in a whole host of ways that we cannot anticipate.
Because you can tell the mileage, but when you
Yeah.
get your car inspected, you don't need the thing in the car to know how many miles you were driving. So I was, well, you know, I think we're just about out of time. Thank you so much for coming. Listen, Merry
You're
Christmas
very welcome.
to you.
Merry Christmas to
And
you.
so- and
My
I-
hand's
you-
warmer now, too.
And I hope you'll come back again when you're
I will.
back in Borks the next time.
That sounds good. I should be back within the next month or two, and we'll come visit again.
All righty. And I'll keep reading the Herald to get all my
Thank you. Well, read the Sun Chronicle, too, because there's a lot of things going on locally that you should know about.
All right.
Last night, Representative Poirier and I hosted a group of people who were concerned about the proposed gun laws that are kind of reactionary laws that were proposed after Sandy Hook and all those places. And we had about 200 to 250 individuals who gathered at the North Attleboro Police Station last night for a forum. And Hank Naughton, who on the House side, and Jim Timilty on the Senate side, who hosts public safety, came out, and we had this wonderful hearing last night where everybody got to talk about these issues. And many times you learn that the legislature, whether it's about puppy dog or guns, responds in knee-jerk methods sometimes to one situation or two situations that happen. And these folks were law-abiding, gun-owning citizens who have a permit to carry and take care of their weapons, and they were making sure that we're not going to throw them under the bus just because of a few bad individuals.
Exactly. Absolutely. Well, listen, thank you very much. We're going to have to stop now, but thank you so much for watching State and Local. I'm Anne Marie Battistone. My guest was Richard Ross, and you're watching Norfolk Public Access. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas. Thank you.